Hey, good morning, good afternoon, everybody, depending on where you're at. We're going to get started here in just a few minutes. So thanks, everybody, for joining us. This is our March Product Spotlight webinar. I'm Paul. I'm Pinpoint's head of customer success in the US. And again, today, just like normal, I'm joined by my colleague, Ed, who is one of our product managers. We've been doing a bunch of these over the last 6 to 8 months, so well-oiled machine at this point. Each month, we host one of these sessions to walk you through what's new in Pinpoint. We'll share a few tips to help you get the most value from the product. And sometimes we'll even give you a little sneak peek at what's coming soon. So we got a lot to cover today. A couple of things that I'm super excited about. This is one that I've had on my calendar for a while and been looking forward to. So let's go ahead and dive in. Ed, let's turn it over to you to walk through some of the new features in Pinpoint.
Fantastic. Hello, Paul. Nice to see you all again, folks. Thank you for joining us. Yeah, today we're super excited because we've got a couple of big things to show you, but the biggest of which is Pinpoint Background Checks. And hopefully you've all seen in advance of this, our emails have gone out explaining some of the details about this. Obviously, we're super excited about it. But this allows you to buy background checks directly from Pinpoint using Pinpoint credits. All those checks are provided by Certn, who are a market-leading authority on background checking. And the real benefit of this system and the way we do it here is that you can bake this straight into your hiring workflows inside Pinpoint. We've got a great way to order checks, review checks in the system, and then manage checks across the board for your platform to make it a really cohesive experience and hopefully save your team a ton of admin time now to deal with background checks in multiple systems and through multiple vendors. So I shall share my screen and we will take a look. So to start with, I am going to take you through how ordering a check goes and how reviewing a check goes, and then we'll look at the configuration after the fact. But first of all, then, I have a job here that has the background check system set up for. And if I go and look at a candidate's profile, so let's take Harry's, for example. Harry's here is in an offer stage in Pinpoint. When I'm looking at his profile, there is now a background checks tab on the left-hand side that you can come in and see. And right now, Harry has no checks in progress, but I want to order some for Harry because he's gotten to our offer and he's accepted our offer. So now I want to do some background checking for him. So I can press the Order Pinpoint Checks button. It's going to show me 3 packages that I have predefined as an administrator of this platform, that these are the 3 packages I want our company to be able to use. And the packages combine some checks into a single place. And this is to make sure that my team downstream, if they were recruiters or anyone else operating the system, always picks out the right checks at the right time, rather than having to remember which 7 individual checks to pick out, for example, if I want to do a full US background screen. So in this case, this job is for a manager job in the US. And so I'm going to pick out my US managers and above package. And that includes some things like US social security number tracing, global watch list and sanctions, and then a level of criminal record check. This one is a county one. So I'm going to select that package. That's the most appropriate here. Last, from the actual checking side, I just need to agree to make sure I've given the right consent, that I have the right legal basis for this check. For those purposes of this demonstration, I'm going to tick all those boxes and say that I definitely do. And once I've done that, I'm going to press confirm and start checks. That is going to send off the email straight to the candidate. That's going to start the process off with them. To see a little bit of what that looks like, this is a preview of the email that goes out. All the candidate side of the experience comes from Certn themselves. There's a legal reason why it needs to be that way. So the candidate's going to get an email which details your company, but it's going to come in from Certn's branding. It's going to say, here are some details, here are the checks we want to run, and get started. Once they do that, they're going to come into the Certn system, looks a little bit like this in the background. They're going to fill in their details, give their consent to have the process begin, and obviously give all the details that are required for the background checks themselves, depending on which type of background check has been set up. Certn have things like a good mobile experience and identity verification that's digital, so that people can use their mobile phone to upload a picture of their passport or driving license, for example, and have the checks all returned that way. So this is what the candidate will see roughly on the side when they get when they're talking to Certn systems. The billing for the check only happens once a candidate has consented to having the check done and filled in all these details and submitted them into Certn systems. So before that point, the check is theoretical, but once they actually start the process and Certn can start doing the checks, at that point, we start the actual billing process and money starts changing hands. So that's what the candidate experience looks like on that side. Now, obviously, this is just a test system, so the results of that check have returned immediately. But what you see when the results have returned are the individual checks that have happened, and then we can see the various statuses of those. So the checks here have completed, and they've all come back with a clear result. To take a slightly different approach, though, if we go and look at a candidate where that wasn't quite true, we have a candidate here whose checks have returned. And in some instances, some of those checks are requiring a review of some kind. So the way I can do that is I can click the report button here, and I'll be able to go and see a detailed report on the candidate in question. This obviously is just a demonstration one. And I can come in and see there are results found on the criminal record check. I can then scroll down and see what actual things were found. In this case, there's a misdemeanor here. And so I can then take a review of this with my HR team perhaps and decide what we want to do with the candidate at this point, whether they're going to pass or fail the check. So that's what the result looks like. And you can have multiple checks and multiple groups of checks. So for example, this is just one order. I could order more checks. I might do a first round screen to make sure we want to go any further, and then do a second round of checks just by pressing the Order Pinpoint Checks button again, and then doing another round of checks if you wanted to, and we can keep doing that. So that's the individual candidate view, and that's how to initiate a check one at a time. But there's a few ways to make that a process a little bit more efficient too. So right now, I can also select some or all of the candidates in my list here, and also do the same thing and order a Pinpoint background check. And again, it's going to take you through the same process to do that. And we can also set up stage actions to do this too. So if I have a job here, and what I want to happen is every time a candidate is moved to the background check stage of this job, I want the checking process to start somewhat automatically. So I can choose to edit this job and edit the stages of the job. And then I can set up on this review stage here called background check, something called a stage action. So here we have stage actions at the bottom, and I can choose to order a Pinpoint background check. And what that's saying is when a candidate reaches this stage, I want to order a Pinpoint background check. And again, I'll pick out one of the packages I have defined in my system. I've got a few here, but we'll do the managers and above one once again, and choose to add the action. And once that's done, we will submit that and save the options there. So now back in the candidates list, once again, I can grab the candidate in this list. Okay, this candidate here is going to move on to the process and move on to being background checked. So I can then move them into the background check stage. Because of the way of the legalities around background checks, I have to give my consent at this moment in time. And so the same consent options you saw before are boxes here that I have to read and tick to say that I have a legal basis for the check and I'm going to comply and have done all my disclosures correctly. So I can tick all of those things and start the check. And now that candidate's checking process has also begun, and they will start having the checks. They will get the email from Certn and obviously start the process there. So super efficient way to get the job set up, and then with that action, just move candidates to the stage and off the process goes to really help the team make that process as efficient as possible in ordering of the checks. So this is all well and good. This is a single candidate or some candidates being ordered a check and reviewing them on a one-by-one basis. But obviously, when you're doing this across hundreds of jobs with hundreds of candidates, we need a system to actually manage that at scale. So we also have on the left-hand side here our new All Checks dashboard. And so if I click on this, I can go across and see all the candidates in the platform across all the jobs that are currently in flight in background checks. And then I can take actions from that point as well. So for example, if we have a look at the checks that have all completed and are clear, these are candidates who've had their checks returned and they've all passed, or at least their results are clear, which for me is going to be a pass in this case. So I can choose Penelope, for example, here and go and look at the results of the check. I could also look at that same report we saw before if I wanted to, but I can also now take the actions I wanted to take to make this go further. So for example, in this case, Penelope is going to move on to our hired stage because she's passed the check. We now want to hire her. I could also then send her to onboarding as well through the system here if you use our onboarding module, so you can send them straight away from here as well. Also here, we have a field called decision. And to put everyone's mind at ease, this is nothing AI related, nothing that's done automatically by anyone. This is a place where I, as a user of the platform and other users of the platform, can track the decision we made on this candidate, just so we make sure we know the candidate has passed or failed our checks in our eyes. So with all things clear here, knowing that they're going to go on in the process, we're going to mark that as passed. And if I do that, we have about, let's see, if I close this, we have 20 candidates in flow. And if I refresh this page, now I've made the decision on Penelope. Penelope's now gone from this list and we have 19 left. And so what happens is when a decision has been made on a candidate, they move over into this decided tab over here, which effectively becomes the archive of candidates who've been through the check process, but we're now past the check stage. We don't need to worry about them anymore. They're not in flight anymore for the checks. So now we can move on. And this allows the tabs that you see on the left-hand side to be the sort of active place to manage the candidates that are in flight. And so hopefully it collects them all together in a nice place to be able to take quick actions to make sure the candidate flow keeps on moving through the process and keep those jobs moving nice and quickly. Similarly, for the candidates that are in review, I can come in here and see the results. And the same way, there's also a decision field here. I can look at the report if I want to, but I can also decide that the candidate may have failed our background checks in our eyes. And again, no other automated decision making at all. This is just a place for me to track my decision as a member of the company. But yeah, I can mark them as failed. And we can move them out of that process as well. For action required, this is a tab where we collate candidates where something hasn't gone quite right in the process, and we just need to come back and double check a few things or maybe take some actions, or the user needs to take some actions. So for example, the candidate at the top here has actually declined to take part in the check. And so what we do about that candidate may be one of a few things. We may reach out to them, go to the messages tab and go and actually send them a message to find out what was happening. Maybe we look at their application details and give them a call. And all of these tabs are accessible from here, so we can go and do the work needed to do that. If they come back and it was a mistake, we can immediately order them some new checks, the same way we've seen before. Also, if they decide we're not going to move any further with them, but they didn't technically fail the background check, we also have the not applicable option. So I can say this isn't applicable, we're past, we're not going to move this candidate any further on in the process, but I do want to archive them out of the view here. And so they'll now move over to the decided tab as well. So super straightforward place to manage all the checks happening in process and keep things flowing. We can also order checks from this page too. So I can choose the order checks. And rather than selecting our package straight away, I'm going to ask which candidates would I like to check. And I can go in here and find other candidates in the system and pick out some names and then go and do the same process we saw before of ordering checks, which picks out these things. So that's how the master checks page works. Now that's the bulk of how the system is operated once it's set up. Hopefully super straightforward and nice and easy to understand and feels familiar, I'm sure, in our Pinpoint design. But to get to that place, there's a few things that would need to happen if you order this check system from us. There's a few things that have to happen first to get to this place. And so there's 3 configuration steps you'll need to take once the system is switched on with your customer success manager. So you can come into the platform and I need to be able to give access to the users I want to have the ability to run and view background checks. And those are 2 separate permissions we can give to people. So for example, I might want to give my recruiters specifically access to both create order checks and view the results of checks when they come back. And so to do so, I can come into our user management section of Pinpoint. And I could give this to individual users if I wanted to through the user page here, pick someone's name out and find them in the list. But actually what I want to do is give that to a whole group of people. And that's an access group. And so I want to find all my recruiters in the system and do that. So I'll click on the recruiters here and I'll go to the permissions tab, scroll down a little bit and somewhere I'm going to find here, Pinpoint Checks. And there are 2 separate permissions. As I say, there is view the results of a background check and order a background check. And so with these 2 boxes ticked, the users, the recruiters there are going to have access to the dashboard here and the ability to see and use checks on an individual candidate's record. The checks dashboard itself respects our visibility system. So if your recruiters have access to just jobs in perhaps their location or their department, the checks they will see in the tab here are just checks for jobs and candidates that they have access to. So the system does respect visibilities as well. So that's the user management setup done. After that, I have to define for this company or this platform which checks I would like to run. And so this is where I can pick out all the checks that I want to actually use. Now, Certn have about 130 checks available in our system currently, and we're expecting quite a few more in the next few months as well. But this is where I would go and scope that down so that my staff on the ground just make sure they're running the right checks at the right time and aren't accidentally picking out the wrong thing. So to do that, I can create a new package. And we have two main sort of things inside here. We have bundles. And these are checks, common checks that are run together, that are bundled together, and they also represent a cost efficiency. So if I buy these individual checks, if they are possible to buy individually, they would be probably the sum total of those would be more expensive than the bundle. But this is a sort of place where you can get a deal on the checks that are commonly used together. So we have our UK basic screening here, for example. We have various US county level and federal level checks, and a few others as well. So those are bundles. And I can choose to pick one or some of those if I want to. But also, I can also just pick out individual checks from the system. So, for example, in the UK, you might want to run a right to work check. So I can search for right to work, select that one here, and come in and create the next thing. I can call this package just right to work, for example, which we'll do real quick. I can also scope the templates down as well to just have an extra layer of making sure the right team can run the right checks. I could limit this to perhaps just operations in the UK. So I can scope this template to be only visible to users who have access to our UK jobs, for example. But that all looks good, so I can create a package. And now this is a package I can come down and my users will be able to select when they are initiating a background check in the way we've seen before. And then finally, this is obviously with the system fully set up, but before you can start your first background check, there are some terms of service that you need to come in and agree to. And if you're an administrator of the platform, you'll have the ability to do this in platform without having to come direct to Pinpoint to have anything happen on paper or through emails or anything like that. So because this system in here has never run a background check before, it's asking me to agree the terms of service. I can choose to review the terms of service, come down and read those, acknowledge when I have read them, and then just be required to name my company and the name of the person who signed this, just so that we and Certn both have this on file to make sure we have agreed, someone has agreed to the terms of service of the system. Once that's done, you press submit, and then you are free to use the platform from that point onwards. So that's the recruitment side of Pinpoint. I know there'll be lots of people who are watching who probably use our onboarding module as well, and we do include this in onboarding too. So if you're familiar with the onboarding system, we have a step library and you can create steps to use in the process. If you create a step now, there will be a Pinpoint Background Check action step. And what happens here is I pick out the recipient for the step and their name, but then I can give them instructions as to what exactly I want them to do when they come to this step in the onboarding process. Once that's in place, here's a quick preview of what that looks like in flight. So this is a step where I want someone to do something and I can review the instructions I've been given, and this is an initiate background check step. So I'm asking here to please initiate the appropriate check for the candidate that's in process. And again, this is just a preview, but I can come in here and press the request background checks and start off again the same exact flow you saw before about picking out packages and then just consenting and so on. So that's it in onboarding as well. There's a few other places it touches too. We do have a reporting system and it is available through this for our advanced report builder. So I can choose to build a new report and there will now be a Pinpoint Checks report and press next. And then I can see some details of checks and these can be exported out of our platform in CSV format. And so I can see some various details around when the check was started, when the check was finished, who the creator of the check was, which template I used and so on. So you can start to report on the details of this out of the system too. And we also have notifications for this. And we know that this is often a pain point with some background check vendors, is not knowing exactly when checks have changed status or having to wait a long time and then realizing a check changed status and would never found out about it. So we have a notification in the system you can enable, which is a Pinpoint Check status update. So anytime a status of a check updates, you can be notified to come back into the system, come back into the dashboard, and then do the necessary actions to, as I say, change the, move the candidate forward or do whatever the next steps of that look like. So that's the check system in a nutshell. If you'd like any more details on this, the best people to speak to are our customer success team. They're fantastic. They'll happily get you set up with this in the Pinpoint credit system. Cool. So that's background checks. That's the big one for today. We do have one more, which is very useful to people too. So the next one is stage group visibilities. And this is a system, we've had requests for this for a little while. The problem, I'm going to explain the problem this solves first, and then we'll come on to the sort of technical and the how and the why. But we have had requests in the past for a list of jobs like this. This hopefully you'll recognize from the managed jobs page in Pinpoint. We can restrict people's visibility to certain jobs in a platform. So it might give people access to just our New York department, for example, or just our UK office, or just a department of some kind. We've had that ability for a long time. What we've also had the request for is to be able to give particular users or type of users access to just certain stages within those jobs. And this is where stage group visibilities comes in. So for example, here right now, if I go into one of these jobs, I have access to all the stages in here. And so I can see candidates in the applied and rejected stage all the way through to the right where the candidates will eventually be hired. But thinking in the example of perhaps hiring managers, the request we've often had is I don't want my hiring managers to see any of the applicants in the applied stage or the rejected pool. We just want them to get involved in the process once they get as far as a first round review. So after perhaps a recruiter screen or something like that. And with stage group visibilities, this is now possible. And so the way it works is this. If I come down to the user management page of Pinpoint, again, I can do this for individual users or for access groups. But at this time, I'm going to restrict my own visibility to just in the platform. So I'm going to click my name here. I go to the visibility section. And the new thing you won't have seen before is this thing here that says stage groups and then stage group visibility. And so I want to say, I want to exclude this particular user from the rejected and applied stages and have them see everything else in the system. And so I can choose to, rather than have them see all workflow stage groups, I want to exclude specific workflow stage groups. And in this case, I'm going to say, I don't want them to see any candidates in rejected or applied. I can save that. And now if I close that window and come back to the managed jobs page once again, hopefully you'll start to see that all of a sudden there's no applied and rejected in the view of the hiring workflow that we have here. If I go back into the same job we looked at before, there are no longer visibility of those stages either. So I can now just see the stages from hiring manager review and beyond. And so, yeah, we can make sure that people can only see exactly what they're supposed to see, which is very helpful. You can also do the reverse of that, of course. I could actually include specific stages rather than exclude stages too. And it works in exactly the same way. I can come in here and say, okay, I actually only want people to see particular stages. Let's say I want them to see the interview stages and beyond, for example. So I'll include those, save the visibilities once more. And once more back to the managed jobs page. And now you can see even less stages. And so this makes sure that the views are really streamlined for the types of users that you have to make sure they're just getting involved and can see the candidates that are actually relevant to their particular use case. So why stage groups rather than stages? Well, we actually have a way to sort of customize this a level further. So we always had the concept of hiring workflow stages. And again, if you've designed hiring workflows or you're an admin of the system, you'll be familiar with things like review stages and interview stages. and building out a process that allows you to have as many of these stages as you like. We may add a review stage in other places in the platform and so on. So it's quite tricky to give people access to individual stages in jobs because every job might have different stages. But with the stage group visibilities, I can define any of the stages in these hiring workflows as belonging to a stage group and then give access to that group. And so again, what we might do, if I show you in the workflow stage groups here, we may choose to add a new type of workflow stage group. Let's call it hiring manager review. And we make that color. And now I can define, when I'm setting up hiring workflows, which stages in that job should be considered here. So I might define that actually I want to have a specific hiring manager as stage review, and then I can bring them in and make this stage part of the hiring manager review group. And so now I can give access to this stage group to people and make sure again that hiring managers are now only getting access to the stages that are relevant to them in the process. So very customizable, but the exclude and include are probably the easiest ones to understand and use. But yeah, the system is very flexible to make sure that you can give the right users the right access to the right candidates at the right time. So hopefully that all makes sense. And that is kind of the end of the demo for now.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Ed, for walking us through everything. That was a lot in 20 minutes, so appreciate you flying through that. Just wanted to let everybody know we'll be sharing a recording of this session along with some help articles that cover today's updates in more detail. And as always, if you have any feedback on these Spotlight webinars, please let us know via your CSM, via me, via whoever you know at Pinpoint. We always like to know. So thanks, everyone, again for your time. I know we're at time, and we'll see you at next month's webinar.
See you, folks.